Hey, I'm Bethany Bomberger. I'm the co-founder of the Radiance Foundation along with my awesome husband, Ryan. And our heart at the Radiance Foundation is to illuminate that every life has intrinsic value. So we educate about a myriad of social issues. We talk about abortion, adoption, fatherlessness, poverty, all within the context of God-given purpose. And our hope is that we motivate people to not just have knowledge and faith, but to actually put it into action and live it out and lead fulfilled lives. Just to give you a little snapshot about my background, I have my undergraduate degree in elementary education and my master's degree is in educational leadership, and I taught for over a decade in both private and public schools. And then I became a homeschooling mom. So for the past 16 years, I've been using what's in my heart to educate with my own children in-house, homeschooling, and also through what, of course, we do through the Radiance Foundation. But as a mom and as an educator, as a pro-lifer, and of course, first and foremost, as a Christian, I believe deeply in empowering children from a very young age to do what is right, to do what is good. And that means empowering children to be a voice for those who do not have one and to defend the lives of unborn children. And so as it is part of our jobs as adults, and I mean our jobs as adults, whether we're parents, whether we're teachers, maybe you're an aunt, maybe you're an uncle, maybe you're a friend, maybe you're a neighbor, but as pro-life adults, it is our job to help create a culture of life within our sphere of influence. And creating a culture of life isn't something mystical in some strange way of thinking. It really just means to create an atmosphere where there is value placed on every human life from conception to natural death. And maybe when you think about the concept of creating culture, it sounds so difficult, so lofty, so overwhelming. Or maybe actually you've just never thought about the fact that you are an integral part of creating culture. But you are. And you are created. You have been born to be an influencer. You have been born to impact the world around you. And so that means you were born to create culture. We have a choice about how we use our God-given skill sets, our personality, our life journey, that our lives journeys take us to all different places. And we really have a choice about what we're going to do with what we've been given to fulfill what God has intended for our life. And whether we are consciously making the decision to use all of those different aspects of our life, our personality, and our identity for the glory of God and to impact culture, whether we're conscious about it, we're making decisions that create culture and create atmosphere wherever we go. If you don't believe me, think about this. Think about your friend group. I think about my friend group. If I were to say to you, hey, which one of your friends is most prone to drama? Who would come to mind? I'm sure there's someone. You probably don't want to say it out loud just in case they're in the room with you. But what if I were to ask you something like, if you're going through a hard time, which friend would you call? Or maybe which friend would you be sure not to call? Right? Well, each of us has gifts, talents, personality, and choices that we make through life about how we're going to use what we're given. And just by the very nature of these choices, we create culture. We create an atmosphere. For Ryan and I, we want the culture in our house to be one that's life-affirming, where you are safe to make mistakes, safe to talk about really hard things, and commonplace to put Christ in the center of everything that you're talking about. Now, we're far from perfect, and there are a lot of mistakes and a lot of I'm sorries that go on in my house, but I pray that we are consciously creating culture that is life-affirming in the areas, in the spheres that we have most influence over. And we can be people who create an atmosphere where pro-life beliefs and love for humanity sets the tone for conversations and motivates others to care deeply about life at all stages. And guess what? This is the same way we influence children. You don't have to become somebody different. You just have to understand the fact that you were created with purpose and influence. And when there are children in your sphere, that in the same way you can influence them. We choose to be intentional about encouraging the children that God has placed within the reach of our influence to defend human life. Honestly, when I think of Jesus as our model, I'm reminded that he empowered children. He did. He loved to empower his creation. But sometimes we don't think about the fact that he loved to empower children. That's what he did. In John 6, we read about how Jesus was teaching to this massive crowd of more than 5,000, I'm sure. 5,000 were on record, but they were hungry. They had been listening to Jesus teaching for many hours, and they began grumbling and complaining, and they were starving, and apparently no one had a solution about how to deal with feeding this massive crowd. Until one little boy did what? He stepped up and he offered Jesus his small lunch of 2 fish, 5 loaves of bread. And then what happened? See, I believe at that point, Jesus then modeled for us what it looks like to honor the heart of children who are willing to give what they had. I have a feeling, and this is just my personal interpretation, that those around the boy were joking him. Maybe the disciples were giving him a little side eye going, bud, yeah, thanks for your little blip of food, but this really will not do anything for this massive crowd that's here. Like, thank you so much, but no thank you. Maybe you could just give it to me and I can eat, right? But Jesus chose to make an example of the little boy and his heart to give what he had. Jesus was modeling empowerment, and his actions spoke volumes and overcame all the naysayers. What does he do? He says, okay, I will take what you're giving me. And he performs the most fantastic miracle. He takes that little and he turns it into a lot. And really, he silenced all those who did not see the value in what this child had to offer. Jesus sees the value in what kids offer. And the boy's actions in this Gospel of John not only impacted 5,000 whose bellies were then full, but whose hearts were moved because they had experienced a mighty miracle sparked by a child. But in addition to that, the millions, he's impacted millions who have read the Gospel of John throughout the centuries and have heard this story and have been encouraged by it. You know, many times there are many people in our culture that overlook children. They don't realize the incredible revelation of God himself that children carry. And the first step in empowering children is to recognize their worth and to recognize that God has placed within children specific gifts and talents and abilities that will influence this culture. That's the first step to empowering children to be pro-life. With all of the craziness we see going on in the world around us, I am always sure to tell my kids that God didn't make a mistake when he placed you here on this planet in this point in history. Not just my kids, folks, you're here for a purpose too at this juncture in time. But for kids, it's important to tell them and remind them that they weren't a mistake, that all that's going on in the culture, God knew was going to be going on in the culture when he placed them here. He knew what he was doing. So every day there is something that you and I can do to encourage children to bring God's heart to a hurting world. You know, we battle for the lives of the unborn because we know that every human being is unique and has something to offer. But sometimes we just don't see children as having that something the world needs. You know, I often talk about this and I call children the overlooked army. Ryan and I have literally met thousands and thousands as we have spoken across the globe and advocated for the unborn. And I wonder how many conversations and how many debates would be radically different if adults as a whole understood the absolute necessity of teaching children what it means to be pro-life. I believe we wouldn't encounter the masses of individuals that say things like, my parents are pro-life, but I know better. They've just not been brought up to understand and embrace a pro-life worldview. Now, I understand people make their own choices. And as people and our kids get older and they come out from under our care, they really move out in the world and become independent. But it is important that we are intentional about laying foundational building blocks about what it means to be pro-life. And a lot of times as adults, we feel that there's so much fear wrapped up in doing this. Often we don't talk about being pro-life with our kids because of the fear of the types of questions and the things that will come up. Like, how much do I have to talk about? Do I have to start talking about sex? What if I haven't begun talking about that with my children? Do I have to talk about my personal experiences? Do I have to talk about the nitty-gritty? So we get overwhelmed, and what happens? We just avoid it, and we don't end up speaking about being pro-life at all. But there doesn't need to be the fear. And I'm here today to let you know that we can exchange the fear with a confidence that comes from having the heart and the tools to articulate a pro-life worldview age appropriately. And you know what? To answer all those questions, all those fear questions, the answer is no. You don't have to be graphic. We don't have to be over detailed. We don't have to be explicit. But we do have to work to establish foundational truths that are the building blocks for a pro-life worldview. You know, a huge motivation of mine for developing pro-life kids, and that's the book, which I have behind me. On which side? There we go, over there. Pro-life kids book. And over on this side, I have the activity book, which has just come out recently, end of 2020. And we have a website, and it was a huge motivation to really develop something that would be a movement so that adults can have the tools that are age appropriate for 4 and for 5-year-olds, but can also be a bridge to talking about deeper aspects of being pro-life. It's a great jump off. Listen, I've taught 1st grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and even there would be days that I'd go into my class and I'd speak to my 8th graders and I'd bring in a picture book or I'd bring in something for them to color and just put it on their desk. And you know what? They would eat it up. They would love it. It would just be a small nugget that would allow there to be an open door to a deeper and a greater conversation. At the same time, when I wrote this book, I actually wrote this text as a poem for my younger kids. And so we can reach kids, I'm talking about from the very, very young age, all the way up to middle school. We have to, well, not just middle school, high school and beyond, but I'm talking about really setting this foundation early on so that our conversations can be deeper. They can go further. We have to teach children before a broken world reaches them. Our children are being targeted at younger and younger ages between what's being taught in school systems, what's being sold to them on TV, commercials, shows, children's programming. All of it has been influenced by a worldview that is not pro-life. I think about the music and the social media influences and movies. You won't find a pro-life worldview necessarily fostered in these areas. Of course, there are folks out there that are putting out information that is pro-life and will help, but it is not the norm. A pro-life worldview won't be fostered if we don't choose to be intentional, because the enemy wants our kids to believe the lies that unborn humans aren't human. Wow. There's an enemy that wants our children to believe that abortion is healthcare. It's not. They want our kids to believe that true feminism means legal abortion. And there couldn't be anything further from the truth. But they are teaching young children to normalize what is not normal. You know, I was watching these videos. You might have seen them. It's the same woman that came out with the Shout Your Abortion campaign. But she has these videos. They are so simple. There's 2 folding chairs. One has a woman and one has a child in it. And the woman begins to describe her abortion experience, and they're able to ask questions. And it's fascinating because you watch these kids go, this doesn't seem quite right. And their questions are answered, and there is an attempt to normalize abortion. And quite frankly, it's crazy to watch elementary age kids go from like this terror or disgust to, I guess if you couldn't afford a baby, abortion totally makes sense. No, folks, that's not the truth. But we're peddling these kids a lie. And children are naturally pro-life. We have to actually teach a child that to dismember another human being is okay. It is their natural inclination to care about other hurting individuals. And so the attempts that are being made on our children to normalize things that aren't normal will only be combated when we speak up and are intentional about speaking into children's lives and really helping to build a pro-life worldview. We have to be intentional about fashioning and encouraging their natural pro-life inclinations. I want to give you 3 pro-life building blocks, foundational truths when teaching kiddos. I want to leave these with you, just a little jump off to help you understand that it's not as hard as we sometimes think. First of all, we teach kids to love humanity. Why? Because the Creator carefully made each of us, and our very existence gives us worth. And this worth doesn't change based on the size, based on our location. Are we living in utero or out? Are we living in Egypt or are we living in Washington, D.C.? It doesn't matter. You still have worth. It doesn't matter which stage you are in development, how old you are, how young you have worth. Now, in my book, Pro-Life Kids, the kids book that I wrote, I decided to explain this way. Let me just read this to you. I'm not going to read the whole book, just a few pages here and there. It says, you're special, just right. You're one of a kind. The world needs your talents, your heart, and your mind. God made you unique. You have no clone. Your fingerprints are yours. Yes, yours alone. He knit you together one cell at a time with love and attention, a plan so divine. It doesn't matter your size or your age. You have equal value, whatever the stage. And where you live won't determine your worth. You're a person. It's true, even before your birth. Wow. Isn't that amazing? The first foundational point is to say and to teach our kids to love humanity simply because God took the time to create them. And we want our children to know that it's important to love every human being. That's why from a young age, we teach them to share. We teach them to be kind. And the beauty of that means that we can teach our children to love every human being, which doesn't necessarily mean that we love every human doing, right? But when my kids were toddlers, I encouraged them to be kind to others on the playground, to be nice. And even to this day, with kids that are teens and preteens, we are intentional about, well, first of all, checking myself, but also pointing out behaviors or comments that will dehumanize others. Teaching that loving every human being, not every human doing, is important. And it is important for them to know that every human being is worthy of love. And when we learn to value individuals based on their existence, we can separate our personal emotions about others' beliefs from their humanity. Because looking at people for what they do and believe is a lot easier sometimes than seeing them as merely as humans. And don't get me wrong, I surely teach my kids that the Bible is the standard by which we measure people's behaviors and their belief systems. But bottom line is this: a person's size, their location, their stage in life does not determine their personhood, does not determine whether or not they're humans. They are fully human regardless of their size, their location, and their stage in life. Anytime, which this leads me actually to the second foundational block I want to leave with you, that we teach our children that anytime one human being determines another human being is not worthy of life, it never turns out well. We've seen this with the Holocaust, right? As people determined others' humanity based on their religion. We've seen this with slavery, right? People are humans or not humans based on the color of their skin. Well, I'll tell you what. I've laid this out with my children since they were really young. We are Christians. I have kids that are adopted, biological. We have different skin colors, different hair types. We talk about these issues. We don't pretend they didn't happen. But this actually influenced, I'm going to show you this, and I'll throw these images up on the screen for you. But that's why I ended up writing about this in Pro-Life Kids book, to gently get into this foundational truth. Sadly, there are those who don't understand that life has purpose, whether planned or unplanned. Throughout history, many believed a lie. You're not a person, no way, they cried. Today, many think that lie is still true, that babies in wombs aren't people too. Abortion is when some say it's okay to take that baby's precious life away. See, kids are learning about these historic events in history in early elementary school. I don't know how many books I've seen gone through my classrooms and library that are out there that talk about these injustices. Number the Stars talks about the Holocaust, Harriet Tubman books, MLK Day, Junior Day is celebrated, and we talk about slavery and human rights issue. And when we understand that abortion, just like these other injustices throughout history, abortion is when one group of people decides another group of people they're just not worthy of their life. This never turns out well for one group in this equation. So my second foundational pro-life building block is to understand that loving humanity and allowing children to see that when one group of humans decides another group of humans isn't human, it doesn't turn out well. And then we lead them into the third building block, which says that we can love others, and defending life is something that children, you can do, and you can do well. I go on, I'm going to read you this little blurb. It says, your color, your gender, and nationality, your abilities, looks, and great personality, they make you you. Fully human indeed. No exceptions, no exclusions. That's the pro-life creed. Like many before us who stood for what's right, we'll never give up as we fight for life. Let it be known we're glad you're alive. Our world is better because you've arrived. So speak up for life. Raise your voice. Speak up for those silenced who have no choice. I go on to really encourage children to know that they're not standing alone when they defend life. In fact, the culture of life will continue to grow. It'll spread across nations the more love we show. That's where I just encourage these kids to understand that you are not alone defending life. In the back of the book, I actually created a section that says meet real pro-life kids, and talked about ways that children can be pro-life. It doesn't mean you don't have to actually, run a big organization, be up on a stage. There are things that you can do by just start with being kind to other people. And I've put in other things that children have done that have helped them to expand and share with others their pro-life worldview. It's amazing what kids end up doing when they catch the vision in their heart, that they have a say and they have a place in this pro-life movement. So it is my encouragement to you to don't let fear dictate what you're doing or not doing. Move into your sphere of influence and think about, brainstorm ways that you can bring some of these building blocks, these foundational building blocks, to people in your sphere of influence. Understand that you have powerful influence and you're going to be in places I will never be. And so I encourage you to think about what that looks like for you. Does that look like bringing some of maybe these tools to your church? Maybe gifting them to some people. This is our activity book, which has everything from pages to color to almost like these little mini posters. Everything's perforated so they can pull it out. But there's word searches and cryptograms and different ways that the children can have fun, just reminding themselves of what it means to be pro-life. But what does that look for you? Maybe that means that you're going to bring this to your library. and ask your librarians if this is something that they could put on the shelf. Just also to help you, if you go to the prolifekids.com website, you can find all of these things. You can find free downloadables. There's an area where if you have some stories to tell about kids that you're working with, we'd love to hear it. Share your stories. We'd love to share those stories with the world and encourage others to do what you're going to be doing. If you're not already, you're going to be doing at home. And also you'll find on prolifekids.com, you will find that there is a YouTube video where I talk to kids about what it means to be pro-life. You're welcome to use it. It's free. You can run it as a class. It's about a half an hour. And it's me talking to kids in my own home about what it means to be pro-life. But one way or another, I'm just grateful that you've given me your ear for this bit of time. I'm thankful for the opportunity to share a little bit of my heart with you and my passion. And I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for all that you've been able to do in your sphere of influence. And I just pray blessings on you as you move forward and influence others to have pro-life worldviews. God bless you.